Europe's been eagerly awaiting new tariffs on Chinese-made EVs, the ones coming into Europe from China regardless of the brand. Well, those tariffs have come into place and things are still in motion, still in flux. It's clear that China has a big advantage, but is it enough to overcome the tariffs? Is there another way, and can the Europeans figure out something to make their own path sustainable? We're going to be talking about what's happened so far, what's happening this week, and what's going on in the future. I'm Brian. Welcome to Future Aza. So we're going to start with this one because we've got a lot to cover here. EU. This is from last month. EU hits China with big taxes in electric car sales battle. Yes, they did. They're going to rise. Imports were already taxed at 10%. They're going to jack it up to as much as 45% for the next 5 years. Of course, they could do less. There are ways to reduce it. We'll get into that. And of course, a trade body for the cognac industry said, yeah, we've been abandoned. China immediately turned around and said, we're going to put taxes on brandy and cognac. We're going to put taxes on all kinds of things your little industries need to survive. Wouldn't it be terrible if we targeted very specific industries that you have alone, for which China is a very big market? Do you want those to sell here? Then you get to this, which is Stellantis and China's Leapmotors. Open orders for affordable EVs in Europe. You see, Stellantis and its China-based partner just announced that they're going to be selling. Hey, look, we're going to, rather than build our own, because we've tried that and they're very expensive, instead of, 40, 50,000, we can have them built in China for as little as 20,000 euros. That's a pretty good deal, except these are hit by the tariffs too. Depending where they're built, depending who builds them, you're looking at anywhere from a 19%, 18% tariff up to 45%. It could be quite brutal. And of course, China does not agree or accept the EU's EV tariffs, and more importantly, says that the negotiations are still ongoing. The extra tariffs will be anywhere from 7.8% to 35%, SAIC being the highest tariffed company. The tariffs are based on how much government support do you get. SAIC and BAIC are both state-owned companies, so they've got infinite government backing. Those companies get the highest tariffs. If you look at someone like Tesla, 7.8%, because not only do they not get free money from China, but they pay a substantial amount of taxes every year, huge amounts of taxes. So it was a good investment for China to bring Tesla to their shores. It has paid for itself many times over. China's Commerce Ministry says it doesn't accept the tariffs, and that the ones going all the way up to 45.5%, that's outrageous. So they're still talking on it. Apparently what's happened is now that the US is going to be less EV friendly, Europe doesn't see the partner in EVs from the US that they had hoped that they would see. They need to rethink this. They need to look at, do these punitive retaliatory tariffs in response to our punitive tariffs make sense if we're not going to get the technology that we needed out of the US, because the US is in for potentially a few tough years for EV development. Looks like we're going to be going back pretty heavy into gas. So that's going to be tricky. China's ruinous EV price war cannot last forever, says Volkswagen exec. Well, look, Chinese automakers are selling some of their cars at a loss. Maybe not a gross vehicle loss, not a loss on a per unit basis, but certainly a net loss overall. But so are you. You're doing that too. Almost every company that makes EVs is losing money on a net basis because it's a new technology and you didn't get into it seriously enough early enough. You could have tinkered away in the background and made something pretty good and compelling and affordable 10, 15 years ago, but you chose not to. You chose to sit on the sidelines, and now you're playing catch up, and catch up is not only America's favorite condiment, but expensive. It's both. It can be both of those things. VW is committed to China despite a ruinous domestic EV price war, its brand chief says. He made the comments with Welt am Sonntag, World on Sunday. Volkswagen remains firmly committed to China, despite its ruinous EV price war by domestic rivals that has hit overseas makers hard. it's hit each other hard too. Companies are going broke. There are a lot of bankruptcies within the China EV industry. It is rampant. EU and China are close to an agreement over the import tariffs. This is what we're talking about. Brussels and Beijing are nearing a solution. We are close to an agreement. China would commit to offering e-cars in the EU at a minimum price. What a fantastic compromise. Is it? Let's break this down. Look, this would eliminate the distortion of competition through unfair subsidies, which is why the tariffs were introduced originally. We don't want BYD to come in and sell a $40,000 car for $30,000. It's unfair to us. But that is BYD's price. If they're getting those subsidies on the back, that is their price. So what you're telling them that they have to do is make more money. Sell it for $40,000, just like we do. But it doesn't cost $40,000. So now their margin is going to be 30% instead of 5%. Magical. That is, it's one solution, I suppose. And this is, again, we've got companies like Stellantis who had banked their future on the ability to import vehicles from China. And Stellantis is not alone. Fuel for thought, how EU tariffs will impact the battery electric vehicle market. So the tariffs were designed to, China benefits from unfair subsidization, which is causing a threat of economic injury to EU producers of electric cars. Potential alternatives, price undertaking. Yeah, we're going to make you jack up the price. We're going to force you to make more money per car. China's also pulling other levers to end tariffs. China filed a dispute to the WTO. China's also started to apply or is considering applying tariffs to products exported from the EU to China. So China could put their own little, instead of BYD getting that extra 25% margin, maybe some of it goes back to China to offset the subsidies that they have given them. Now, before we take this article too seriously, look at these projections. They think that Chinese-made car imports to the EU are going to radically increase for the next 3 years, despite the tariffs, and then slow down. No, they're going to flatten if the tariffs remain. And if the tariffs do not remain, they will climb. They certainly won't come back down. Why would they? How could they? Fine. How are automakers responding? Well, they've got some ideas of their own. So one thing they can do is Europe can tell them, we want you to onshore production. We want you to produce cars here. BYD already has a factory under construction in Hungary, I believe. And other Chinese manufacturers are hoping to follow suit. But there are subsidies available to companies that build cars and batteries in Europe. Tesla was slated to get a whole bunch of money for construction of their 4680 factory in Berlin, but they declined. They stepped back and said, we don't want that. We don't actually want it because there are strings attached which are unacceptable. EU to demand technology transfers from Chinese companies. New requirements will apply to batteries, but could expand to other green sectors. Hey, if you want some free money, that's great, but you have to give us the technology. I don't know if they're going to accept that offer. That seems pretty steep, if you ask me. It's crazy. But these companies do need to partner with Chinese companies to survive in China. Time is running out for traditional automakers to adapt to China's electric car market, signaling to industry analysts that companies must double down on local partnerships to survive. GM, Volkswagen, and Nissan each saw their China revenue drop. Well, this is just for cars in China. They're really struggling in China. But look at these BYDs. These are fine-looking cars. They work fine. They pass safety tests. The quality seems to be reasonable. I've heard some mixed reports on the quality of some of the other brands, but that's not who I'm really focused on. The strong will survive. They just will. So if we look at Volkswagen Group China to step up investment in joint venture with SAIC Motors. So it's not just Stellantis, it's everybody. It's not just GM, it's everybody. So they want to make cars with, Volkswagen wants to make cars with SAIC Motors. And SAIC is already selling cars in Mexico. They are already an international company. And that tells me that they have price advantages. SAIC is already in partnership with Volkswagen.
You can't export those. Those have a 45% tariff if you try to bring them to Europe. SAIC, formerly known as, the Shanghai Volkswagen Automotive. SAIC, the company itself, is a state-owned player. It is a China state-owned automobile manufacturer in Shanghai. So that's going to be the high tariff stuff. It's going to be expensive. It's tricky. What do you guys think the solution is to this, or is there one? Have they painted themselves into a corner? What did I miss? What did I misunderstand? Leave it in the comments below. Support the mission. If you enjoy this coverage, please recognize that YouTube is one of, if not the devil, and pays very poorly. So every bit of support helps. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you guys. Everybody else, like, subscribe, comment, do what you do. Stay tuned, stay juicy, and I cannot wait to hear from you clever robots on the flippity flop.